The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello Rank Squad and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite football podcast back for another week, and today we're going to be talking about the job Mauricio Pochettino has on his hands at Chelsea. You might remember we did a podcast very similar to this when N'Golo Kanté went in at Tottenham. We gave him 5 things in his in tray that he needed to sort out. N'Golo Kanté did not sort any of the things out. Hopefully, Mauricio Pochettino will have a better go at actually having a listen and finding out. We're actually also going to be joined by a Chelsea expert in Liam Twomey of The Athletic and the Straight Outta Cobham podcast, an old friend of this parish. He's going to be back talking with us in part 2 about all of the work that Pochettino has to do, and by God, there's a lot of it. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today, and joining me is Mr. Sam Tyler, Rank God. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yes, very well. It's funny you mentioned the Conte podcast. I remember setting that one up for you guys with Nathan A. Clark, who was great. And the first thing Nathan said was, right, basically, we need to have an exit plan in place for when Conte inevitably explodes. And we need to deal with that gracefully. And based on that press conference he delivered at Southampton, I'd say he didn't really hit the mark. So let's see if we can get a better success rate with this to-do list for Pochettino at Chelsea.
Yeah, one of the least graceful exits ever, I would actually probably argue. And of course, our transfer guru, Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very good, very good. Both on stag do's, weren't we, this weekend? So we've had a little recovery time now. I feel a bit more human than I did recording on the Patreon yesterday.
Yeah, I've had 3 in 3 weeks.
I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, you're younger than me. Maybe that's the only difference here. I would not be doing that anymore. I don't know if I want to go on a stag do ever again, to be honest.
Well, we'll see. Look, I'll be talking about it in part 3. The gibberish is things I've learned from these stag
Don't go on stag do.
Yeah, so that's that will come as well. But before we get into all of that, let's start with things we love, shall we? And DJ, do you want to kick us off?
Lads, Barcelona won La Liga. I mean, we got to give them their flowers. We've done it with other teams this season. Napoli got theirs last week. And look, it's whether you like Barcelona or not, one thing that a lot of neutrals will love is that Xavi Hernandez has won his first La Liga title. He done so on the turf.
As a manager.
Yeah, sorry, as a manager for sure. Yeah.
I think he got 7 as a player.
Yeah, I think he knew the feeling generally, but this was a different feeling for him because he did it from the dugout this time. They beat Espanyol 4-2 in the Catalan derby, celebrated on the turf of their rivals and then got chased off of it, which was entertaining, dangerous, depends which way you want to look at it. But Xavi, what a job. In 18 months, what he's done to turn around the feeling of this football club to lead them to their 27th La Liga title. A fantastic moment for him and one that goes to show that he was ready for the job. Obviously, coming into it, you're never quite sure what you're going to be getting. Are you getting a Solskjaer? Are you getting the real deal? It's like they got the real deal here. What I like about Xavi, and when you read about it, is it's like I think he was shocked when he came back to Barcelona about how things had fallen apart. The standards that had been set all through the successful years that he was there had decimated in those years where things just started to crumble under certain people. The playing standards, the training standards, just the way that you were supposed to conduct yourself as a player of Barcelona just was no longer the case anymore. And, he pulled aside a few members of that squad who were senior, Busquets and the like, and just set about making sure they knew who they were playing for and what it took and what was expected of them. And that one of the things was expected of him was to win the league. And he's done that so quickly, so much quickly than you'd have thought. This team started the season in crisis. Literally, they were talked as the crisis club of the world. Managed to sign Lewandowski and Koundé and pull off some deal, Rafinha. And, they were in a moment of despair turned into a moment when they've won the league. It's actually quite incredible that he's managed to do this. And now he's trying to get Messi back to the club. This man is do anything he can to restore past glories to Barcelona. And I think that for us neutrals, that's something to love.
Yeah, I think with this, it's I'm happy to marvel at a manager for his tactical acumen, for setting up a team that can consistently win games and be excellent on the field. I have even more respect for a manager who can stop the glass ceiling from crumbling in above him and deal with the ridiculous amount of rubbish, politically speaking, that these clubs tend to attract. And it's the same story really with Erik ten Hag at Man United. He's kind of holding a fractured, broken team from the top down together himself, and he's managing the stuff on the pitch, he's managing the stuff off the pitch, he's liaising with a difficult situation above him, he's dealing with the politics. It's an incredible job, and Xavi has done a very similar thing. Okay, he's not obviously directing the transfers, but Barcelona has been a bit of a circus over the course of the last year and a half due to financial difficulties, selling off TV rights, all sorts of stuff. To be able to manage a club to this degree of success and this consistency of win rate with all that crap going on in the background, I think it takes a really special man. And Xavi has done an amazing job of keeping all of that at bay and managing to make sure that the product on the pitch is a winning product. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, and you can see the relief, I think, so much in it. And as much as anything else, we mentioned that 4-year gap. That's a long time for Barcelona. This is one of those things that, over the last 2 decades, I would probably say, we've seen this Barcelona side dominate in La Liga. Yes, Real Madrid have dominated in Europe 100%, but a gap of that amount, feels like it shouldn't be happening to Barcelona. And yet we've seen all of the bits and bobs over the last couple of years, the structures, the levers, the whole shebang. And as you say, to have done that in these circumstances, yes, they've signed players. Yes, they've signed big players. Lewandowski's arrival, I think, was a major kind of cog, even if his second half of the season hasn't been great. But the way that things have turned around and the way that it's looking at Barcelona for the future now is mostly due to the fact that it feels like they're in competent hands again. And Xavi deserves immense credit, I think, for all of that. And also their joint title parades of the men's and women's teams made me very, very happy. I thought they were excellent. So I really enjoyed those scenes as well.
Nice.
Right, let's flick onwards. I have a thing we love as well. And I know that Sam's going to love this as well. In that Marcelo Bielsa has been appointed as the manager of the Uruguay national football team. And
oh yeah,
I couldn't be more over the moon, if I'm perfectly honest with you. And it's just so exciting. And the rumors of this sparked a little while ago that it was potentially in the works. And suddenly, the idea of Bielsa going back to not just international management, but international management in South America. Obviously, the job he did with Chile was remarkable, and he is still loved there. Obviously, I think the fan group still call themselves the Widows of Bielsa, which is a pretty remarkable thing to have going on a few years later. But Uruguay feels like a nice fit, and I'm really, really excited to see what he can do with this team, Sam.
Oh, it's a great fit. I mean, what do you expect from your Marcelo Bielsa teams? It's the work rate, it's the grit, it's the hunger, determination, all the off-the-ball work, the pressing. It suits Uruguay and their national style of football just down to the ground. It's a perfect match. And then beyond that, I give a shout out to Jose Perez, someone I follow on Twitter, who said, I've always been disappointed at how Uruguayan managers have basically bypassed a really talented midfield crop. They take the grit maybe to a level too far and try to maybe bypass some of the really talented footballers they have in terms of playmaking as well, and being more creative and being more assertive. And when you look at this Uruguay team and you consider the fact that they've got warriors top to bottom in every line, and you've got Ronald Araujo on the the halfway line prowling and pressing and pushing up and stuff like that, that's amazing. But give him Fede Valverde and give him Manuel Ugarte, fine. Give him Bentancur, and use these players to their potential on the ball as well as off it. And we're about to see a very different Uruguay to the likes of which we've seen. I mean, in my lifetime, basically, because Oscar Tabarez was, he was in charge for like 16 years or something like that. And so, it's been like that the entire time. This is so exciting.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful match. And I love, Dean, that Uruguay have just posted a thing with a little bucket this morning with the Uruguay logo on. They're diving right into the Bielsa hype.
Yeah, I saw that and I just thought of you too. I knew how happy it would make you both. You are, I presume you'll be going to watch his first game. I don't know how you'll get there, you'll make it work.
We ride at dawn.
You'll make it work, yeah. There must be a boat you can get to Uruguay that's a cheaper option. The only people I feel sorry for is Leeds fans having to watch this from afar. The more you think about it, the idea of getting rid of Bielsa, going through what they've been through and ending up at this moment in the season, Sam Allardyce team trying to stay up and scrap for everything. It's like sometimes
Allardyce got a point against Newcastle. That's not bad going. Not many people get
but
a
little spoiler alert, they do feature in Melon of the Week, so
we'll leave Leeds there, shall we?
I like to imagine this conversation that the social team for the Uruguayan Football Association had with their designer, their sort of the image that we're talking about. It's an announcement image, basically, isn't it, for Marcelo Bielsa? And Jack, if you cast your mind back to, commissioning creators at Bleacher Report for different images to launch different things, you imagine telling someone, right, we need a picture to announce Marcelo Bielsa. Okay, what do you want on it? A coffee cup and a bucket. Okay.
And a picture of him? No?
No.
Leave him out.
No.
Leave him out of it.
You don't. We don't want a picture of Bielsa in this Bielsa.
That's the last thing we want. Do not do that.
Just imagine
Let
the
people
personal
work
picture
this
going,
out. People will prefer this.
But not having faces in it, wouldn't I? That would have been the classic. It doesn't have enough faces in it. I'm like, what do you mean? It's the back of Joaquin's shirt. Everybody should look at it all the time. Right, let's get on to the main thrust of this podcast. After the break, we're going to be joined by Liam to talk all things Chelsea and Mauricio Pochettino. Stick with us.
For the ones finding new ways to ensure the job always gets done. For the ones wearing many hats. For the ones who are hands-on, even from far away. And the ones keeping business moving forward. We are Grainger, offering professional-grade industrial supplies, plus real-time product availability and access to experts ready to answer your toughest questions. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where I'm delighted to say that we're joined by a very special guest, an old friend of the pod, Liam Twomey of The Athletic and the Straight Outta Cobham podcast. Liam, it's brilliant to have you with us. Thanks so much for jumping on.
No, pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, we thought that, considering all the things going on at Chelsea, it'd be good to get some expert opinions on how this is going to look for Pochettino. And we're gonna get into the 5 things that he really needs to sort out pretty much as soon as he gets through the door. But just before that, we're going to take a quick reminder on Pochettino's last tenure at PSG from Jonathan Johnson of CBS, French football expert. He's going to just remind us how it ended at PSG.
It's fair to say Pochettino and PSG never really worked in the way that everybody, I think, expected it to. Obviously, Pochettino returning to PSG, where he was a former player, captain, no less, and then coming back as a highly rated coach. I think the hope was that he would lead them to take a big step in the Champions League. Obviously, was following on from Thomas Tuchel, who managed to take them to a Champions League final. So finally got them over that bump of, regularly crashing out in the quarterfinals and then regressing a bit. Pochettino did deliver some impressive results. PSG fans will remember sort of dismantling Barcelona away from home in the Champions League, knocking out Bayern Munich as well, who were defending champions, a year on after that Champions League final defeat in Portugal. But equally, there were always kind of questions about what sort of style Pochettino was trying to implement with PSG. Big questions as well about his trust in the youth that PSG had available. Obviously, we know that's a problem that's predated Pochettino and is, still exists now. But it's something that Pochettino was unable to remedy, and that led to, guys like Xavi Simons, moving on to PSV Eindhoven, where he's exploding at this moment in time. And I think what was perhaps most damaging, to Pochettino overall and damaging to PSG as well, is that Pochettino had talked up coming back to PSG for quite some time. PSG were kind of, waiting for their opportunity. And when it did come and they took it, it kind of felt like it was, something that, I don't know, maybe Pochettino has never quite, really convinced, was ever the right fit for him. Once the novelty of returning to Paris and to Liga wore off for Pochettino, it kind of devolved into almost something quite similar to when Jose Mourinho was at Manchester United, where, Pochettino never really felt settled, lived the entirety of his time pretty much out of a hotel, and it was almost like, he just couldn't wait to leave. Obviously, he added some much needed silverware to his CV, but really it was silverware that he was expected to add to his CV, sort of almost like a minimum service.
Okay, so Sam, it was hardly perfect, and he's got a fair bit to prove here, I think. So should we get stuck into this?
Yeah, the conversation is centred all around, what Chelsea have to do to make up the ground and what Chelsea have to prove. But yeah, at least part of the conversation is about what Pochettino steps into and what he has to prove too. So I think it's kind of mirrored on both sides. But let's get stuck into this because it's a hell of a to-do list. In a way, it must be quite exciting for him because he's been given the keys to a gargantuan team and an incredible playing squad. But there is a lot that needs to be sorted out here over the course of the summer for him to be remotely successful. So I think in a more traditional ranking, we go 5-1 and save the most important thing for last. But I'm going to start with it because I think it shapes so much of what's to come later and so much of the rest of the team. I think the trickle-down effect is really, really strong. And so I think the first thing and the most important thing he needs to do is decide on the identity and the profile of his number 9. Now, he's used different number 9s in different tenures. He didn't really get a big striker at PSG, but he loved a big striker at Tottenham in Harry Kane and at Southampton before that with Ricky Lambert. And really, he made quite a lot of effort to build his teams around these strikers. And I think if he's given the opportunity to pick a striker, he probably will go for something like this again. So let's just recap. Kane, easy to play, easy to build around, right? I mean, he's an absolutely ridiculously good striker and he's so good in so many facets of the game. Why wouldn't you build around him? Seems obvious to me. But at Southampton, he made clear, considered tactical moves to build around and play around Ricky Lambert, even getting to the point where he played James Ward-Prowse at right wing so that he could just cross the ball to Ricky Lambert over and over again. That was part of the strategy. He moved Ward-Prowse to right wing for a full season. So he will do what he can to play to the number 9 and play to a big number 9 where possible. So looking at Chelsea's in-house options, seems like Romelu Lukaku, if he were to return from loan and play a part, is the only direction he can really look in there. No one else can fulfill this role. So that's the first question. Will Lukaku return and will he play a part? Because if the answer is no, then he's to go to the market and maybe spend quite a lot of money.
Well, Liam, that seems like a reasonable place to start because Romelu Lukaku has insinuated that he would like to remain at Inter. Now, whether Chelsea allow that or not is a different question. But what are the kind of looks at where we are within the club in terms of what Lukaku's future looks like?
So far, we've had no indications that Lukaku would consider coming back to Chelsea or that he would be infused by that prospect. But we also know that possibly even more than last summer, the economics are stacked against him going back to Inter. Because Inter's financial state, despite their remarkable Champions League run, is pretty dicey. And some of their pronouncements on Lukaku can be construed as posturing, but some of it I think is also a genuine reflection of where they feel they are financially, where they're saying that even on the terms at which we took him last year, which we were led to believe was Lukaku voluntarily taking about a 30 to 35% pay cut with Inter covering the rest of his salary and paying I think about £7 million loan fee, even along those terms Inter are saying that's too much. I think they're saying that partly based on where they are, but also because he hasn't been for them what he was the 2 years before he went to Chelsea. He hasn't been their talisman. He's been rotated in and out by Simone Inzaghi, and only recently has he begun to show signs of getting back to the player that he was. So all of these things are amassed against him going back to Inter, and I think honestly, from a financial point of view, Chelsea's perspective, bringing him back is really the only thing that makes sense. We know that Chelsea's ownership had pretty quick regret at agreeing to the deal that they did to send him to Inter so early along those terms. They did it to back Tuchel, and then of course they made a very different decision on Tuchel not too long afterwards. So I think there would probably be an appetite from Chelsea to bring him back and try to rehab his value at Stamford Bridge. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know this, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Pochettino was keen on the idea too, because of everything that Sam just said. His history with focal point number 9s. We know that Lukaku has limitations in that respect. There are things he can't do, but he is extremely good at the things that he can do. And I think Chelsea left a lot on the table, shall we say, last time in terms of things that Tuchel didn't try or just wasn't prepared to try to maximise them that maybe Pochettino would. So it all comes down to whether Lukaku feels those bridges are burned, whether whether he wants to come back. But it's a difficult situation for all involved because he has 3 years left still on this massive contract, and if he would come back to Chelsea, he would be their highest earner again. That's where his salary sits in the structure. So there's a lot to this, but I think on a pure football perspective, bringing him back, there's a lot of merit to it.
There's loads of merit to it, and I think that Pochettino is the sort of manager he needed to go in there in order for this to work, because of the type of person he is at building relationships with players and making you feel that this could actually work. I've spoken to people about Lukaku and whether he would come back, and what I was told recently is that they said, look, there are players in this team who feel like if Lukaku had been at Chelsea for this season, wouldn't have been a problem. Like, all the what type of chances they set up were made for a striker like Lukaku to be finishing off. And so once you take that into account, once you think all they need is a number 9, they just need someone to finish chances. That is what Lukaku does. That is his bread and butter. So if he can feel like he's welcome again, if he feels like he's got the confidence of his manager, and he can get off to a good start, so he's actually scoring goals and hasn't got that burden on his brain, then honestly, there is no reason why Lukaku can't come into Chelsea and score 20 goals next season, and Chelsea are in contention to try and win the Premier League title. It is that simple. I know it doesn't work out as easily as that, but that is how easy it could be. Liam's right, he really enjoys his playing in Serie A. There's no doubt about that. And I think if he had a straight choice, he would probably just choose to play for Inter Milan, because I think he's been a better mind space. Generally, I think it just edges it for him. But also, third time lucky at Chelsea, it's going to haunt him for the rest of his life. The fact that this move hasn't worked out. Why not give it one more try? I think the other thing you have to consider is that Nkunku's coming into this team. Now, under Poch, look, it was talked about before, the potential for Nkunku to come in as a false 9. I don't think that was the plan when they signed him, but given the fact that nobody can score goals in this team, I think it's suddenly come as an option what's he like as a false 9? Could that work? Under Pochettino, I'm not convinced that would be the option. But then you've also got to throw in, Brozier will be coming back into the equation. They've got to get rid of Aubameyang. And then there's the Kai Havertz thing as well. Where does Kai Havertz actually fit into all this? What's his position going to be? And why does he keep talking about Thomas Tuchel every single week at the moment? Is it because he wants to get back to playing with him? Is it because he misses him? I don't know, but he keeps doing it, and I'm not sure what it means.
Well, look, let me take it on from there then, because speaking of Havertz and what might be in store for him, I think in a Pochettino setup, he goes back to the attacking midfield band in terms of your rough position group. And that's where I want to go next, because Pochettino is basically going to have to figure out, how to cast the new roles in the play for Dele Alli, Heung-min Son and Christian Eriksen. So the 3 players that are basically playing off his number 9. So for those of you that can't cast your minds back, I'll give a brief recap for you. Dele Alli was basically a support striker. He played off Kane, but often ran ahead of him, was often trying to latch on to Toby Alderweireld long balls from the back, and he was getting into the box, he was scoring headers. He was basically a forward more than a midfielder. Eriksen played sort of just off the right, narrow winger, kind of half space area, big time creator and a big time crosser as well. Obviously, crossing to Harry Kane was a big one, and to Dele Alli, who was very good in the air. And then Son was a runner over the top of the defence, running off the target man, and probably the secondary goal source in the team, probably good for 15 to 20 per season. The expectation was that player would score goals. Now, I'm not saying that Pochettino has to play 4-2-3-1 with a big striker and has to recast these roles exactly, but it does strike me that A, this is his preferred style. Southampton, Tottenham, and a bit of PSG. This is what he wants to do. And B, there's a lot of these players on the books at Chelsea in this attacking midfield band that really suit these roles. They really do. They look. You look at them and you think you could absolutely play that role, and you could absolutely play that role. The interesting thing is that several of them, I think you could argue, could play 1 or 2 of the roles, and that's where the debate comes in. I think because you've got, say, I don't know, Mason Mount could be Dele Alli, but so could Raheem Sterling. And so could Christopher Nkunku.
I was going to say.
Absolutely could be Nkunku. And Sterling could also play off the left. Sterling could be Son, couldn't he? Could quite easily be Son. Mm-hmm. But surely that's Mudryk, right? Surely that's Mudryk.
Mudryk's Son, I think, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but it could also be Sterling because he can also play that role. And if you're Mudryk,
it's probably for the best that there is more than one option in these positions.
100%.
I'm not suggesting that they're all going to be rotating.
Well, Chelsea
every
have
week.
about 27 options in these positions, so they're
Apart
fine.
from on the right where there's no options. But
yeah.
maybe that Christian Eriksen role goes to Mason Mount, Liam. That would be my think about it.
That would be my thinking. Mount's not as creative, and I don't say that to denigrate Mount. I think Eriksen is a supremely creative player. Mount's probably a bracket below in that respect, but in terms of the intelligence with which they find space and move between the lines and the positions they like to take up, one of the things Mount does really well is he'll operate in the half space on each side, and he interplays with an overlapping winger or wing back really, really well. He's got a very easy chemistry with Ben Chilwell and Reece James, depending on which side he's playing, in the same way that I think Christian Eriksen did in those areas. And I do think Mount's got the technique to supply those kind of crosses that Dan was talking about as well. Just on the alley front, to me, it's Havertz. Because I think if you look at the player Havertz was at Leverkusen and what he's shown at Chelsea, his success was arriving late in the box, using his plus size for his position to score headers, as well as finishing, and being more of a play finisher than a creator. I think Havertz would be really well suited to that role, and Kunku could probably do it in a slightly different way. And I do totally agree that Mudryk is skill set wise probably the closest to Son, although obviously he's got a fair way to go, a fair bit of polishing to do to reach that level.
Yeah, it's funny. I had to write a piece on this, like Poch 2.0, like if he was to copy like what he did at Tottenham at Chelsea, like, so similar things to what we've just gone through there. But I had to take it a bit further as well and look at like who would his Vertonghen be, who would his Moussa Dembele be. And I think the biggest problem is the Dembele one. They don't have the Dembele, do they? And I think we spoke to it before. Did we say like Romeo Lavia is like the guy that they need as that
just
person?
by Romeo Lavia?
They just don't have that part. So like that's where the money needs to be spent if they're going to actually try and replicate exactly what he built at Tottenham.
Yeah. Well, let me take it on then, because I think the next thing on the docket here is this N'Golo Kanté future contract and his backup or his replacement, depending on, what happens. And like maybe I've missed a news cycle or Liam can tell me, but as we sit here today, in 6 weeks' time, N'Golo Kanté's contract will expire, and I don't know what's happening next. Now, obviously, they've had to deal without him for most of the season. Let's be honest; like he's missed most of the season, and it's been a massive shame. Whether or not they can find a resolution with him, whether that's what they want to do, given his, the injury issues that have been creeping up, I don't know. I would say extend him and also buy another one. Not to say that there's just loads of Kantés around, but you're going to have to find a midfield profile that can also offer a lot of what he does, because you now, as Jack famously coins often, you can't rely on Kanté. Like you can't count on him being there any longer. So you need to have a proper plan, even if you have him on the team. So Liam, what do you think happens here?
Yeah, so it's all gone very quiet with Kanté's contract extension. The last thing we heard, it was reported by my colleague David Ornstein, was that they'd made positive progress to get him tied to an extension. And Chelsea have wanted all along to keep Kanté. They see him as a really high quality veteran presence as much as anything. I know he's not the most vocal leader, but I think they see him as a very good example daily on the training pitch, and his personality is just a really positive influence on the squad, as well as everything that he offers as a player. But I think he's probably one of these guys that is waiting to see what happens. And now there is a measure of clarity in that we know Pochettino's coming in, even though it hasn't been formally announced yet. So that may help, but I think it will probably take at least a conversation with Pochettino, between Pochettino and Kanté to sort of nail down where Kanté fits into the plans. I think it's interesting from a tactical perspective, because if you're looking at, I did a piece a little while ago on, Pochettino's 4-2-3-1 at Tottenham and how Chelsea players might fit into that. Kanté is one of these players that could maybe sort of play either of those midfield roles in the double pivot. He does have a very varied skill set, but he's, contrary to some lazy opinions, he's never been suited to be the deepest midfielder. And so in that sense, I think if you've got Enzo Fernandez, who is the one that Chelsea are clearly building around for the long term now, I think the view is that you need to pair Fernandez, particularly at this stage of his career where the unpolished side of his game is the defensive side. With the ball, he's already pretty special. But you probably need to pair him with more of a destructive presence in midfield.
But also a more mobile presence as well, Liam, right? A more mobile. Because Enzo, he has loads of qualities. He can't move about too quickly. He's a relatively stationary dude. And that's not a criticism.
Compared to Jorginho, the man he was replacing, he's an athletic upgrade, but I do take your point. He's certainly still got his limitations in that respect.
I think you look at this, though, and you kind of try and work out who comes in here. I mean, the problem is, I think, when you're looking at trying to map these 4-2-3-1s, the two players in the pivot were Eric Dyer and Moussa Dembele. Enzo is neither, right? That's not to say that he couldn't fit in a Pochettino team, but he is very much neither of these players. He's not going to sit back and split the defensive line in the way that Eric Dyer did as the kind of secondary defender.
Or Wanyama.
And he's
was a bit of Wanyama too.
But he's definitely also not the kind of dribbly presence that Moussa Dembele was. And we talk about this quite a lot. So
that's more Kovacic.
Kovacic, right, is the natural position. But I don't think that Mateo Kovacic is going to be at Stamford Bridge come August. No. So when you look at this, it's kind of like, how do you get the best out of Enzo in a double pivot? And the really obvious answer, although you have to go and splash loads of money on it, is you go and sign his double pivot partner from Benfica. You sign Florentino Luis because they already have that chemistry. Look, I don't think Chelsea are going to do this. One, because Benfica are now like, well, you paid it last time, you're going to pay it again, and they've just upgraded Flo Luis's his kind of release clause to about 105 million as well. So I don't think they're going to go and buy two midfielders for over 200 million from Benfica. But if you can find a player in that profile, then somehow this looks a little bit easier and it looks a little bit better. And that's the next question, I suppose.
Yeah. So basically, to sort of come back to why this is massively important, because this feeds into kind of the fullbacks as well. Like Poch's style needs very good attacking fullbacks. There's a lot of workload on the fullbacks. It's very physical. It's very energetic. They get really high up. They overlap. They hold the width, and they get up and they fire crosses into the box. And the first thing I look for when I see Pochettino taking over a team is, right, what the fullback's like. And at PSG, it was an absolute shambles, and that was always going to hold him back initially. And we basically called it at the time. We were like, okay, he needs new fullbacks. To be fair, they gave him Nuno Mendes and Achraf Hakimi, so that wasn't too bad. At Chelsea, they don't need surgery in this area. He has been given an absolute gift in the form of Ben Chilwell and Reece James, two fullbacks as a pairing among the very best in the world. But no surgery needed there. But when they push forward and when they attack, and when the target man's in the box, and when the second striker joins, and maybe one of the midfielders, they are going to need a shield in midfield to protect against counters and transitions. You need someone in the channel to protect the outside of the centre-back and behind the full-back. And what Dembele and Wanyama did really, really well was just sit in those channels, basically the half spaces, and just protect and just stop and protect the outside of the centre-back from being killed by an outside runner every time Tottenham overcommitted. You need players that can cover ground and have defensive acumen in order to just shield this area of the pitch and protect you against counters. Dembele and Wanyama and Dyer were good at this. Kanté, very good at this, but they need others. Oddly enough, Dennis Zakaria looks like a good fit to me, but who knows? I mean, absolutely who knows? The other one in the squad that does make me wonder, actually there are two. Trevor Chalobah has played 4 different positions in his senior career so far and played midfield for Lorient on loan and has the size as well, because I think this is a small Chelsea team and it might need to consider getting a player who's 6 foot and above here in this position to help with set pieces and basic aerial stuff. Chalobah's interesting. And then Ethan Ampadu, every time I watch him play for Wales, he's basically a one-man midfield covering a 50-yard square zone on his own, and he nearly pulls his own calf every time because everyone else lets him down. I do look at him and think, if you played with some relatively competent players, you might be all right. So there might be some in-house solutions here. I'm not sure. They might not have to go and drop 100 million on Flo Luis, but they need to do something, and Poch will have to figure this out.
Well, the other one is Declan
I was
Rice.
going to say, hang on, we haven't even spoken about the main thing yet.
He's the supercharged Eric Dyer, basically. Like he's a much better version. There's a guy who was a centre back all the way through the academy, so he has those instincts. He interprets that role in a defensive way, but he uses the ball extremely intelligently. There's been a long running culture war on Chelsea Twitter that has been epitomised in some respects by kind of Enzo Fernandez versus Declan Rice. Who should Chelsea have gone out and signed? I think both.
Yeah, that's both.
I think they're a really good combination. They complement each other perfectly.
What do you think about the fact that Declan has this intention to evolve into a different sort of midfielder though? Because I think he wants to be that driving midfielder that gets into the box and stuff, doesn't he? Can that work?
In that system, maybe not.
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure if any of the clubs that would sign Declan
want him to do that,
view him that way. I think he wouldn't be the first player to view himself in a fundamentally different light to the way that everyone else in football sees him. How much of his prime did Theo Walcott spend insisting that he was a number 9?
It happens with midfielders quite a lot as well. I think more than anybody. I always have this bone to pick with Adrien Rabiot. The guy just doesn't understand his own skill set. He's nearly 30. Grow up, Adrien.
Just for the word, Chelsea shouldn't sign Adrien Rabiot. Let's just make that very clear. But I do think there are players that you can make this work with. I mean, the one that I've kind of become interested in, and it's a long running saga this as well. But Yuri Tielemans has a lot of Moussa Dembele's skill set. He's not quite as good a carrier of the ball, but he actually does more defensive work than people give him credit for, and he ranks really highly for blocks, for tackles, for interceptions, and for progressive carries. And I think that on a free transfer, that makes a lot of sense for me, for Chelsea. It makes a lot of sense.
Not having it, Jack.
Fine. You don't have to have it.
Yeah, it's not up to me. He's not mobile enough. He's slow. He's slower than Enzo.
I think you bring him in as an Enzo rotator, not necessarily as a complement part.
I'll think about it.
You'll think about it.
The thing I wonder with him is why haven't any of the big clubs actually gone for him yet? Why has he been?
He's having a shocker of a season for a start.
But everyone's known for 2 years what his contract situation was, and there was a lot of talk that he would go to Arsenal. And it just feels like, maybe it's as simple as what Sam said about the limitations that he has that people see on the pitch. But it feels like when you get to a stage like this and no one has moved for him yet, you start to think, what do clubs know that we don't, that makes him less attractive than maybe he might seem?
Yeah, I mean, Dean, maybe you can fill us in.
I don't know, really. No, I don't, to be honest. Liam's right. You do get to a stage. There are always players like this that are constantly linked, like
Florian Grillitsch.
Isco linked with the Premier League move for 10 years in a row, and then just never seen. But there's always this thing, and you're like, okay, so why is no one biting the bullet? And there's a feeling in the scouting world, obviously, that he hasn't been worth it yet, and that's all you can judge it on at this moment in time, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right, Sam, should we kick it onwards again?
Yeah, okay, to point number 4. We can keep this one relatively brief, or at least I can, and then throw it to you guys. But it's vitally important. None of this works. Pochettino's style does not work. This project fails unless everybody at the club gets a lot fitter very, very quickly. Liam, I'd be really interested to hear your point of view, since you're at every game and you're watching them in the flesh, and whether or not you can corroborate on this. But to me, watching Chelsea, they look unfit. I think Lampard has referenced this at one point, or I might have imagined that, but I'm pretty sure this is a massive, massive problem. And it's a damn good job that Pochettino gets the entire summer and pre-season. And trust me, lads, it ain't going to be fun, because none of you are anywhere near fit enough to play his football.
This has been a big theme of Chelsea's disastrous season. Tuchel was not happy with the way pre-season went. It was organised at the last minute because of the takeover and the sanctions and everything. Chelsea did too much travelling, too little training. They played a lot of games in different time zones. It was just, on many different levels, it was less than ideal. And they were also coming off a season in which they played 63 games. which was the most alongside Liverpool. And I think you saw with both of those clubs this season that had a cost in terms of the injuries that they suffered across the board. But they came into this season, I think, physically undercooked and maybe with some fatigue still in their legs. Then you replace Tuchel with Potter, and every coach has a slightly different approach in terms of what they want to do with physical conditioning. But of course, you don't necessarily have that time in a 6-week sprint towards the World Cup, which is what Potter was plunged into. He said towards the end of his time as coach that the players had told him that it was the worst pre-season they've been involved in, from an organisation point of view, just from how well it prepared them for the season. And now, since Lampard has come in, he has said numerous times, and I know it can be a little bit of a new manager trope at times to say the players aren't fit enough. I think Dyche said the same at Everton when he came in after Lampard, which was quite a funny alternate view. But Lampard has said on several occasions at Chelsea that the fitness levels are not good enough. And when you're looking at it on the pitch, you can't always tell where a lack of physical sharpness ends and where a lack of motivation begins. Chelsea have also been one of the least motivated teams in the Premier League.
This has been the thing, man. While I was weighing it up, I was, because I've been looking at Mateo Kovacic recently, and I'm like, well, he's either unfit or he's given up, and I literally don't know which one it is.
Could be a bit both.
Yeah.
I think they all know they've got very little to play for between now and the end of the season, and we know how big Pochettino is on physical fitness. I think it will be maybe the toughest pre-season that Chelsea as a club have seen since Antonio Conte, which may well be needed.
Since poor Charlie Masonda passed out on the pitch. Yeah, well, that is probably what's needed, isn't it?
Graziano Pella said it, didn't he, of Pochettino? He was like, he murders us in the week. And I mean, I suppose you expect nothing less from a Bielsa disciple, but equally, it does feel like a major issue, and, one that is going to need to be addressed. You're going back to that pre-season, Liam. Someone told me once that Chelsea took more flights than played games, which really did make me laugh, I think, at one point in terms of what that looked like. But it wasn't, not ideal preparation. You could imagine that it's not going to be quite the same, although Chelsea are going back to the States to play in this summer series.
They are, but if you look at where the matches are, it's a lot. They're a lot closer. It's a lot of East Coast. There's a couple of games in the middle, but they're not flying from one end of America to another. And I think there probably will be a fair bit more training time before those games and between them.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Sam, what's the last and final point then in the in tray?
You didn't think we'd do a whole Chelsea chat without calling for a squad cull, did you? Hey, we got this far, but I'm sorry, but we have to talk about it, don't we? We all know that this squad is too big, way too big to be healthy, not just financially, but also just like camaraderie-wise, atmosphere-wise. We've all seen the stories about, not enough seats in the dressing room, all that stuff. And also, I think they might need to raise some money because whether or not, they've amortized this transfer spend over the next billion years, they did spend 600 odd million last year, and they probably won't be able to do that again. Not that they need to. They might need to raise some capital. So for a couple of different reasons, you need to get rid of some players. I'd love to throw the floor to Liam here to sort of pick through it, because I was looking through the squad and looking at some of the players that are actually still technically in the on the payroll. Very funny. Malang Sarr still at Chelsea, hilarious stuff. But they've got returning players, from loan, like Levi Colwell and Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ian Martson that need decisions. You've got some older players that are coming to the end of the tether. I don't know. I'm interested. You mentioned earlier that Liam and Jack, neither of you expect Kovacic to be a Chelsea player in August as well. So, Liam, can you sort of take us through what you expect here?
So I believe Chelsea have 13 players currently in their first team squad who are in the final 2 years of their contracts as of this summer. That's not including guys like Kanté, who are technically free agents. So there are a lot of decisions to be made in virtually every position. And I think when you look at the recruitment that Bowley and Eghbali drove over the last two transfer windows, it's pretty clear that their vision has been to pretty much replace the first team squad, or the vast bulk of it, and to implement a different salary structure although that's been undermined a little bit by some of the deals that they did last summer.
Completely.
So it is currently a bit of a mess in that regard as well. But they do have players who either don't have futures at Stamford Bridge or don't want, guys like Kovacic, Christian Pulisic, Hakim Ziyech. Some of these guys, particularly Pulisic and Ziyech, they've been looking for ways out for a while, and it just hasn't happened. Partly because the finances have been a factor, and I don't think Chelsea will necessarily find it easy to offload all of these players because of the fact that there is no money in Europe outside of the Premier League, and even the clubs that do have money in Europe do not tend to buy big Premier League clubs' cast-offs. I mean, the story in January was Hakim Ziyech camping at PSG and somehow not getting his deal in the final minutes. But the story should have been that PSG, one of the richest clubs in the world, were A, the only club interested in Hakim Ziyech, and B, were only interested in him on loan. Yeah. And that shows what Chelsea are facing when they're trying to offload these guys.
Yeah.
So
just to say, it's not even just the fees, though, is it, involved? It's the wages that are involved. And this is the other side of it with Chelsea. Like, I know that a lot of the squad have to take wage cuts now as a result of no European football. That's fine, but I don't believe that the drop-off is significant enough that these players are suddenly going to become available and affordable to any interested team across Europe. So, I've told it's going to be there's about 12 players available for transfer at Chelsea for this summer. But to get even one out is like a massive success story. Like, it's an achievement to actually get someone to sign one of these players because of all the other bits that come with it. And, we forget that, these players as well that have been signed recently on, these long-term deals, there are rises to that as they get through that contract. There are bits and pieces that come into that deal, so that it comes higher and higher and higher. So even some of the players that you look at now who will be available, you think, well, their wages can't be that high. They've probably crept up since last year, and they probably are higher now, even with a wage drop-off. So it's so complicated for Chelsea to actually get rid of players that are actually going to make a difference to their wage bill. So they can loan some out. As you say, if you can't even get rid of a Ziyech and a Pulisic, there's other guys that you're going to struggle to get rid of too. So what do you have to do? Do you have to pay off some of their contracts? Do you have to accept that you're going to be paying part of it to just get them out the door? It's honestly, they've got themselves in a real mess here. Over the past few years with the different structures to these contracts and the different types of players that just no longer suit what they're looking for. It's really complicated. Pochettino is going to be looking at a group of a muddled squad, that just are incompatible with one another. And some of it you can solve, but some of it you just really can't.
I think the new owners would point to the contracts that were given out in the Abramovich era and say that generally there was a practice of giving out above market salaries. And that's certainly been the case in terms of guys like, I know Pulisic and Ziyech, I don't want to keep mentioning them because they're not the only two guys in the squad, but Kepa, even Mendy, who wanted pay parity with Kepa, and Chelsea wisely decided they couldn't pay two keepers nearly $300,000 a week. So there's a lot of that throughout the squad, and I think the new owners signalled last summer that they are prepared to take at least an accounting loss to just get some of these guys off the books with the deal that they did to send Timo Werner back to RB Leipzig. I think that was actually a victory, even though they sold him for a lower fee than he was bought for, and even though on the accounts it was a $3 million loss. Just getting him off the books when he was clearly a transfer that hadn't worked and a player that didn't want to be there was good practice, and they're going to need a lot more of that this summer if they're going to get the numbers out the door that they want to.
There's also this flip of the homegrown players leaving, right? And the way that helps to balance the accounting books. So if a homegrown player leaves, obviously Chelsea can bank the entire profit because there is no fee to bring them in. There's no kind of crisp of it. So
they're the ones with the market. They're the ones that clubs are interested in, and they're not necessarily the players that Chelsea want to let go.
Yeah, and also they're also losing the identity that they've built and the relatability with the fan base, which is they're already struggling with. There's very few players in this Chelsea squad that fans actually relate with and idolise or even like half of them. So when you're talking about Mason Mount leaving, Conor Gallagher, they're two players you really shouldn't be losing right now. because there's something there that's integral to what Chelsea are building. And let's not forget, like, Chelsea have this clear identity pattern of getting academy players into that first year and making sure in every first team squad there are players that have Chelsea in their DNA that are still involved in the squad. Even if they're not getting on the pitch, you'll always see that there are young players in the setup more often than not. And so I think it would be a terrible, terrible decision on Mount. And even Conor Gallagher, I don't think at this stage would be a great idea. I think he probably is expendable, but I just think it's that identity thing that Chelsea is struggling with. So at least to get another year of that while they're trying to go through this process of restructuring and finding out who they even are going to be anymore, that to lose these sorts of players is just a bit of a worry.
Yeah, well, maybe they can get rid of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and everyone will be slightly happier. I would imagine. Around
Nobody in football hates Loftus-Cheek more than you, mate. I think.
Yeah, nearly made it through the pod without that. Nearly.
I deliberately didn't bring his name up in that part, and you still threw it in.
I wasn't there. I'm still seething about that single year on loan at Craven Cottage. We'll get to it. But I think, Sam, that concludes proceedings. Does it? Have you got
it does.
To add?
I mean, look, honourable mention to the goalkeepers. We managed to do like 40 minutes worth of talking about Chelsea and barely mention the goalkeepers. Liam mentioned it right at the end. And I think there's a case that they need an upgrade. There's a case for an upgrade between the sticks. But I think there are so many other more burning issues. Allied with some potential financial constraints and some outgoing work. I just don't know if they'll get to it. Really, I just don't think there are enough months in the summer. So
he wants to, though, doesn't he? This is the problem. Pochettino has identified in talks that like he does see goalkeeper as a potential issue, but it's just who's going to take one or both of those goalkeepers. I think Mendy's going to be the easiest one to get out. He's clearly there's a briefing right now to try and find him a new club, and there's a couple of interest. I think it was Monaco. I was told about recently. Somebody else as well. So there are,
and he's on less money.
So
it should be a little bit easier.
I think Mendy you could lose, but again you've got to find someone, and Onana, whoever it ends up being. It's not like you're looking at a small purchase here. So if you're also looking at having to buy a number 9, if that ends up being the case, if you're having to get in the 80 million pound midfielder, and there's also, we haven't even talked about the fact they're still interested in João Felix for some reason. Like, that hasn't even come up here. The fact that they might actually still be going down that path is crazy. So, don't know where this ends. I mean, they spent 600 million at the moment. The way we've just been talking, even with those 3 or 4 players, we're at basically £1 billion now. So I don't know. Like that's totally solved it all.
Maybe they will have to sell Conor
João Felix.
Yeah,
João Felix would be the strangest decision they've made yet. I think given what they already have in the squad and Kingsley coming in and what we've seen from him.
It makes me wonder about. That's the one thing that makes me wonder about Havertz, to be honest, because I'm like, it just seems so unnecessary. Don't get me wrong. I think Felix has had some really good games for Chelsea, and even if the output isn't there on like his stats and stuff and goals and assists, I think there's been games where Felix has been great. But there's no obvious place for him to play. Nobody knows what he's actually going to do in that team unless Poch
It's not about him, is it? The conversation about João Felix is not about João Felix. It's about the other 85 people.
It's not about
that play
the fact that he
position.
hasn't got a space. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe their biggest fear is they don't sign him, Arsenal do. Maybe that's what they're just trying to prevent from happening, because like João Felix, there's still going to be a market for him. Maybe it's that he ends up at Arsenal and they don't claw back that gap. I don't know.
Who knows? All right, on that bombshell, I think we're going to leave it. And all that's left for me to do is to say thank you so much to Liam Twomey for joining us. Liam, where can people find you if they want to hear more from you?
Yeah, you can read my ramblings on The Athletic. If you follow Chelsea on the app, you'll see everything that I write. And we've also got Straight Out of Cobham coming out once a week, talking about all the latest happenings at Stamford Bridge and Cobham.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, so it's worth tuning in, especially at the moment. This
8 pods a week they do.
Exactly. And Liam, thank you so much.
Cheers, guys. Pleasure.
We'll be back after the break for the Gibberish and, of course, Melon of the Week. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Ranks FC, and our thanks once again to Liam for all his insights in that main segment. We are going to come away from any sort of sensibility now and move into the realms of madness. And Dean Jones, the floor is yours.
It's time for Melon of the Week. This week's Melon of the Week is Junior Firpo of Leeds United. He's making sure that Leeds are relegated. That seems to be his main job in the team at the moment. I mean, his performance levels have fallen through the floor. This weekend v Newcastle, he conceded a penalty and was sent off. His all-round...
And won a penalty. Give him his due.
Okay, so he started to do something good and then was like, this is going a bit too well. Better give away one and get off of it. His all-round display was poor. I mean, defensively, can't feel anyone in that team with any confidence. It's not even a one-off performance. It's like this all the time, like regular 2 out of 10s, 3 out of 10s. If he does quite well, he gets a 4 out of 10. The best thing about all this for Leeds is that he's banned for the next game, so he can't do it again. But honestly, like Junior Firpo, someone I thought might be a good signing when he joined, looks like he might be taking him down to the Championship, lads. Melon.
I mean, look. First of all, it was an abysmal performance to the point where I think he was on 5 yellows in my head by the time he got his second yellow.
Yeah.
How he'd stayed on the pitch to the point where he could even get another yellow card.
Why wasn't he substituted? Yeah.
Why wasn't he sent off? Why wasn't he subbed? Why is he playing left centre back in 3? That's my question. What's going on? Big Sam Allardyce. What is going on? He is a flying wing back and nothing else.
Yeah.
Come on. Put him in a position to succeed. Don't put him in a position to fail. Although I genuinely think he was trying to get sent off. I think he might have big plans next weekend and he needs the weekend off.
It was a very strange performance, wasn't it? It was a real keenness to get off that field, which isn't ideal at all.
No, it's not been great. And I think it's been kind of doubled down on by the fact that Leif Davis, who was once at Leeds United and played under Bielsa a couple of times, was let go to Ipswich and has more assists than Kevin De Bruyne this year in League One. He's been playing absolutely sensationally for Ipswich. And I think there's a lot of Leeds fans being like, why have we just not got him playing? Please, can he just please play? He's much better. So, yeah, that's where it ends up, I think.
Yeah, now it's time for Shout Out of the Week. So Shouts Out goes to J-Man in the USA. He's given us the 5 stars and he's just gone, it good. That's all we need. He says it's good. No, he's gone deeper than that.
That was just the title.
Just the title. He says these 3 fellas watch a lot of football and it makes for a fascinating weekly listen as they have a wide-ranging knowledge that ranges from the mainstream hot topic items to the obscure insights into which under-20s are going to take the world by storm once the professional scouts catch up to the Ranks FC scouting system. Sam Tighe's title of Rank God is as deserved a title as it is a daunting one as he takes on new challenging rankings every week and gets them mostly right. Jack Collins is a Pandora's box of football knowledge, always chock full of facts, insight, and most of all, words. Ask him the time and he'll tell you how to build a watch. That's one of the best phrases I've ever heard. Dean, Lord of Melons and Warden of Transfers, is the lovable and relatable third member, a wonderful foil to his cohorts and serves up a steady stream of comedy and solid takes. Thanks, Ranks FC, for the countless hours of entertainment and football fun. It good. I'll tell you what, there was another one, so thanks for that, J-Man. But Z-Rod actually
That's unbelievable.
It was great. Z-Rod actually sent his second review. He'd done one before. He sent in another one called the Rafael of Podcast, and he went into quite a lot of detail too. I'm not going to read it all out because it's been read out before, but if you want to get your review in now on a second device, then absolutely go for it because he is absolutely changing the game here.
Z-Rod's changed the game. It's all different. Thank you so much for all of your reviews. Please do hit us up if you're on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like. Hit us with those 5 stars and leave us a comment. It really does help us to grow the podcast, and we really do appreciate it. Right. That is the gibberish siren, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to build a what?
3 steps.
I am going to take my 3 learnings from going on 3 stag do's in 3 weeks. And so it's going to be a help to anybody who's listening to this who is planning a stag do, hopefully.
Or bachelor party, in case
or
you
a
wonder what a
bachelor
stag do
party.
is.
Yes, 100%. Thank you, Dean. It's always good to have the translator in tow. Right, so number 3 is that 2 nights is enough for a stag do. 2 nights is enough.
Well, it's the limit, I'd say.
I did 3 this weekend. I've done 2 2-nighters and the third one. The third one, I completely and utterly conked out on the third night. I was sitting there. Everyone was watching Eurovision. It was a Thursday, a Friday, and a Saturday night. Everyone was dressed up watching Eurovision in a bar. And we'll come back to Eurovision. But I was just asleep in a chair. I was just completely and utterly asleep in a chair. And it was about 10 p.m. And I realized that whilst the battery on this engine is pretty high, and Dean and Sam will kind of stand for this, I'm a good sesher, if you will. And I can go, got good staying power. Even this was too much for me. Now, it might be the accumulation of seven nights on a stag do in approximately 21 days.
Mate, we can't rule out the fact that it's just a knock-on effect. You know, 63 games in a season, it's going to have an effect.
Yeah, cumulative. But I do think that 2 nights is perfect. The only exception to this rule is if you have a night, sort of a calmer night in the middle. So if you went for like a dinner night. So if you did like a Friday night, a dinner night, and then you went out again on the Sunday, you could cope with it. But it's impossible, right? No one does this. It's like Fridays, we don't get it wrong. Fridays, we get it wrong. Those are the rules of pretty much every single engagement that you get into in these regards. So I would say that my first learning is that 2 nights on a stag do is enough nights.
Yeah.
Secondly, in this thing is I think 15, 16 is the peak number of people. Done a couple. So we had 10 when we were away this weekend. We did a 20 in Liverpool, and it was about 18 in Newcastle. So I've had a couple of different experiences, and I think that peak number is about 16 because it allows everybody to get to know each other without it being like, oh, there's people from all over the place. I feel like on the 20-man stag do that I went on, there are still 3 to 4 people that I don't know, which is a shame, really, because I'm sure they're absolutely lovely. But I didn't get around to spending quality time with everybody. And that I think is a shame. 10 is a little bit low, just a tad. But I do think the sort of 16 to 18 range, we're in good territory of it all being good. And that was my first one in Newcastle. And it was great stuff, great vibes.
Shepherding that many people around sounds like an absolute disaster.
Yeah. I mean, what you do is
that many people.
You split them into teams. That's what happened. That's what happened. You split them into teams and you give them little codes. No, it was like team Lilac, team Purple, everyone doing different things. And they were just in charge of actually getting people from place to place, which actually worked quite nicely as a whole thing.
It does sound good, yeah. It is a bit junior school, but fine.
It works. It worked. My biggest take is that some activities on a stag do are good and some are bad. And I would ideally say that paintballing, especially indoor paintballing, is not a good stag activity. You would think that it might be. You'd think that it might be.
No, I don't.
But it's not. It's not. Because I am still limping a week later from the bruises that I got hit on my leg. The stag sent a picture this weekend, 7 days after his stag, and he looks like, you know, when they do suction cups on footballers' backs and there's all those red marks everywhere, his back still looks like that. It has welts all over it. Now, he did have to run through a firestorm of paintballs as his last activity within it. But I would just say the amount of damage done to each other, the amount of pain caused, and the amount of people who are still messaging being like, yeah, I'm still in real amounts of pain. There's, bruises on my leg that have gone green. It's all not very pretty.
That's pain.
It's all pain. Go-karting, good stag activity. Going to a football match, great stag activity.
No, I didn't even handle the go-karting at Sam's. I was too sick, so I didn't even manage to get to the racing part of that. When I went paintballing, I actually really enjoyed it because what I did is I found a corner where nobody would find me, didn't shoot out anything, so nobody had any reason to question whether I was there. Just spent an hour laying on the floor. That was it. Nap. Then I heard it all end. Got up, walked back. Still all my paint completely clean, well rested. Job done. Actually, quite enjoyed it.
That is very Dean Jones.
So me.
My one experience of paintballing, I got shot in the neck and couldn't talk for a few hours afterwards. So I'm never going back, or have never been back.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, paintballing, too violent. Go-karting, great fun. Especially we did it on a rooftop in Spain this time out. That was lovely. We don't
actually do activities anymore. Any of them, like my main group of friends. Like, so the stag I went on the weekend, there was not a single, not even an idea of an activity. We didn't dress anyone up. We didn't even dress him up. We didn't bother. We did nothing. It was literally a weekend away. I was like, oh, should we dress him up? I was like, no.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
This is what happens when you've all got kids, haven't you? So you all just want to go away.
It was. That is true. Like, you've all got kids.
Just...
All you want to do is sit together in a bar and just get drunk and have a laugh. Like, that's literally all we wanted to do. So that's what we did. It was yeah, that's just the thing. Like, getting old is fun. You do what you actually want to do.
Where do we stand on mini golf as an activity? Because I think that's a light enough touch to be amusing.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd be well up for mini golf. So that goes into the correct activities pile. Going to a football match was lots of fun with loads of us. We went to Sunderland versus Watford. That was great. But yeah, just generally, I think that's my learnings from my 3 stag do's, and I hope to apply them in the future. Right, with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you once again to Liam Twomey for joining us in that middle section. Thank you so much to the rank god, Mr. Sam Tai.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you so much to our transfer guru, Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins, Knave of Hearts. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for tuning in. As ever, we really do appreciate it. And if you know anyone who might fancy having a listen to this podcast, we'd love it if you passed it onwards. Take it easy, gang. Peace.
The new Chevy Silverado HD puts you in command. Own strength with its enhanced available Duramax 6.6-liter turbo diesel V8. Own the lake with its available advanced towing technology. And own technology with an available 13.4-inch diagonal touchscreen. The new Chevy Silverado HD. Own work, own play, own life. Learn more at Chevy.com. Find new roads. Chevrolet.